him. Well, it was a sad day in Major League Baseball yesterday with the perishing of Tom Seaver, one of the all-time greats, just a fantastic pitcher, class act. Had the opportunity to meet him when he was here for the AAA All-Star Game in 1999. And as I wrote at CrescentCitySports.com, I'm typically not starstruck at all. I've been around the biggest names in sports for so many years doing what I do. But when I met him, I was virtually starstruck because I love baseball. And to see a guy of that magnitude and having watched what he did was pretty impressive to me. Well, the guy that got to watch it up close and personal joins us
I
now.
just pay to see you speechless, Ken.
Our good and great friend and my former broadcast partner and friend for life, Ron Swoboda, joining us now. Ron, it's always a pleasure. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing just great, Kenny. I enjoyed reading your piece and talking to you about Tom Seaver the other day. You wrote it well and told it the way I meant it to sound, and I appreciate that. But Tom Seaver, Tom Seaver carried himself with a dignity and a focus that translated directly to what you saw when you saw him pitch, and what you saw when you were in the outfield trying to help him win one. You knew if you had Seaver out there, you didn't need a whole lot of runs, and you were going to need to run balls down all over the yard when Seaver was on the mound most of the time. I mean, you look at the numbers and they speak loudly. The guy went through life leaving a huge wake, and a huge number of people who felt like their moments watching him play were formative in their lives, and they're all hurting a little bit tonight. And I think us guys that played with him feel exactly the same.
Man, Ron, it's good to hear your voice, pal. Prayed for you during your surgery time. I miss seeing you at the ballpark. Trust you're doing better, buddy.
I'm doing great. It's been a terrific run. I'm over a year past my bypass surgery. I've had a good surgeon, and he's maybe tacked on a couple of years I wouldn't have had.
Amen. Well, look, I know when you see something like this today, that takes you back to those memories, and they were showing that. In fact, I was watching the Mets and Yankees and going back and forth, and the Mets guys had Kuzman on, and they were doing the interviews today, and they said as a young man when he walked in, it was like he was a veteran already, the way he carried himself.
That's what I've been saying. I felt like he came out of the box, a finished product. There wasn't any break-in period. He was ready to go. He was the same pitcher with the same stuff, the same confidence, the same bearing when he walked out there as a rookie in 1967 and for a bad Mets team and won a few ball games. You know, we didn't give him a whole lot of help, but he didn't need a lot. You know, if you got him three, you had a chance.
I saw the catch live. I was at my grandmother's house. I can tell you where I was sitting as a kid watching the game. I've seen it over and over. Every time I've seen you, I've talked about it. I didn't realize till today Tom was pitching then.
Tom, I kind of owed him one, I've been saying. In Game 1, the first hitter, Don Buford, first hitter in the 1969 World Series, Game 1 in Memorial Stadium, where I grew up in Baltimore, where I played as an amateur in Memorial Stadium. The first hitter, I was so nervous, so tight. Buford hit a fly ball that really was right back to the right field fence. And I was just so uptight and nervous. And I made every mistake, didn't get back in time, didn't get set up, didn't connect with the ball. And I let it get over the fence. And Tom Seaver, was a home run, and we got behind and never caught up. And Seaver took the loss in Game 1 of the '69 World Series against an Oriole team that everybody thought we had no business being in there against. In Game 4, Seaver is pitching a shutout with first and third in the ninth inning with Brooks Robinson, my favorite player as a kid growing up in Baltimore. And, of course, he hits a line drive in right center field, and I make a catch that a lot of people thought it was beyond me. So did I. But I felt like it evened me up because I caught one. I owed him one from game one, and of course we went on and won 4 straight.
Visiting with Ron Swoboda.
But Seaver was the guy. You wanted to do your best behind him because you knew he gave you such a chance. And the thing that I'll never be able to understand is why he didn't pitch a no-hitter, at least with the Mets, before he was finished there. He had an almost perfect game against the Cubs in 1969, and Jimmy Qualls got a base hit off him in the 9th inning. But Seaver had no-hit stuff that night. It just didn't happen for him, and it didn't happen while he was a Met. Took him a while. But he got
that's when that Big Apple stuff was coming up, and he looked like he was from Central Casting. It was perfect, wasn't it?
He stopped in that game in 1969 against the Cubs. He paused, and you could see him literally. I'm on the bench because Hodges had taken me out for a defensive replacement, and I'm on the bench, and I saw Seaver just pause and look around the stadium. They were 10 deep, standing room only. It was an incredible scene. The Cubs
men were wearing ties.
We needed to catch, and he just soaked it all in, and then he lost the no-hitter, and he said that was the worst thing that ever happened, the worst feeling he ever had on or off the baseball diamond when he lost that perfect game against the Cubs. Imagine that.
Yep. Well, he got it. He got his no-hitter with the Cincinnati Reds, of course. And people, I don't know if they realize that I don't know if people realize he pitched over 2 decades in the major leagues and that he finished with Boston. Some people might remember that, but some might not. Of course, I remember the Reds days very well. And you were with him for 4 years in New York. But it's kind of a sad statement when a player like Tom Seaver can't stay with the organization that he made famous and that made him famous. Really disappointing.
Yeah, I think they were.
Like that couldn't stay in New York, right?
They might have been bailing out of a big contract, and maybe they thought Seaver had a little too much weight, carried a little too much weight. I'm not sure what I was working for WCBS in New York. I had made the difficult, rugged transition from an outfielder to a sports guy in New York. So I covered that, and I thought, it was like a 3 or 4-for-1 deal. And Doug Flynn, who came over in that deal from Cincinnati with a couple of other players, three other players, Pete Rose came up to him, and Flynn loves to tell the story. Pete Rose was on the Reds back then, and he came up to Doug Flynn, who was a shortstop on the bench, and said, "You've been traded." And he said, "Where to?" He said, "To the Mets." And Flynn said, "For who?" And he said, "Tom Seaver." And Flynn, who was really a light-hitting shortstop, and he goes, "Straight up?" And it's like, well, not really. Granger, and I think a pitcher, right-hander, Granger, sinker ball guy, and a couple of other players. But it was an epic ending, in New York when Seaver left, and he had a lot of gas left in the tank, that's for sure.
He surely did. And by the way, before I proceed with the next comment or question, it has to be noted that the Mets beat the Yankees 9-7 today, Ron.
Bless their souls. Well, they're on a little bit of a run then, aren't they? They beat Baltimore yesterday, and maybe it's not too late. No, they just made 3 different deals to try to help themselves out. They're moving guys into the bullpen and out of the starting rotation and trying to figure out how to finish them off. It helps when you score a bunch of runs, though, doesn't it?
Got that right. Goes without saying. Of course, when you talked to me and we did the story at CrescentCitySports.com, you told me the toughest pitcher you ever faced was Bob Gibson, and Gibson's stuff was great. And pitching off that tall
he walked
mound,
in the room
pitching
now.
off that tall mound. He'd scare the living I mean, this is a faith-based show, so I won't say hell. I'll just say he scared the heck out of you.
Do a PG,
right? yeah. So
I'm telling
he
you,
scared the heck out of you.
I'm 76 years old. He walked in the room. I get nervous. He really didn't want you to hit a foul ball. He wanted to dust you off and shut you out in about 2 hours, and he could do it. Yeah, that year he had that made baseball lower the mound because he was, what did he have, like a 1.16 ERA or something like that, and he lost 9 games with the Cardinals, and I'm like, how do you have an ERA that low, almost 1, and you lose 9 games? They didn't score a whole lot of runs for our boy, I think.
No, and you didn't get to face Seaver in a real game, so you couldn't.
No,
use
I know.
that as something
I hit
to
off
draw
him
on.
one time, and I hit off him in spring training one time, and that's when you wanted to face him.
Right. Yeah.
I got you, man.
No, it was something. He was very special. A guy that he understood what he was about. He had both hands on the steering wheel as a human being and as a pitcher. He knew what he was doing, and it was obvious when you saw him make a few appearances back in 1967. That's a long time ago. That all he needed was time to accumulate the statistics that made him, first ballot Hall of Fame.
Tough guy. Hey, last night I was watching the Yankees and the Rays game, and when the news broke, and they started talking about Seaver, and a couple people talked about him. They were talking about his competitive nature. Michael Kay tells a story. He said after he was retired, showing how competitive he was in broadcasting, and the broadcasters from New York were in Seattle, and so the broadcast teams and the media teams decide to have a game. Seaver's standing on the sideline. The New York team has a 1-run lead. It's going into the 9th inning right now. He hasn't done anything. He walks out. He said, "Give it to me." He walks out on the mound. He's got his street clothes on. He's got the tan slacks on.
Really?
He said, and Michael Kay, the story goes that he threw 9 pitches and ended the game. 9 pitches into the game. Had both knees were
Really?
muddy when it was over. And he said all he threw was 9 balls.
I know. That's all you need, right?
Right.
That's the minimum. And unless you're going to hit one, and you weren't. But that's a pretty cool story. Because I never saw him at an old timers game. I just remember one time we were at a Mets game. They had us in New York for something. He and Jerry Koosman, who were our 1-2 punch for a long time with the Mets, and Koosman was another guy that you wanted out there when you needed one, because he was a warrior with good stuff and a huge heart. The two of them talked one night at an autographing thing we were at about how many pitches before they started feeling like they were losing it. And it was like 130, 140 pitches. Today 100 pitches, and oh my goodness, you got to start thinking about making a move with a starting pitcher. But those guys were ready. They were ready to go 130, 140.
Ron Swoboda with us for a couple more minutes before we let him get away. And, of course, we've talked about trying to get baseball back to New Orleans. That landscape changed with Major League Baseball's latest proposal to take over everything. I'm a bit skeptical of that. I don't like it because it's going to eliminate a lot of teams and hurt a lot of cities and a lot of markets. I hope it doesn't hurt us here because I really want to see baseball back here. And I've said it before, but I never enjoyed anything more in my life than doing Zephyrs games, and in particular doing them with you.
Do you remember my friend Gene Rogas, who was an artist, football player at Tulane, and he did a great big acrylic painting of out the window at Zephyr Field of you and I sitting there doing a ball game, and I still have that up in my office. And Gene has passed away a long time ago. One of my great friends, amazing guy, but I feel the same way. You made me begin to understand the kind of work you had to do to be to try to be better at being a play by a color analyst, because if I didn't do the homework and talk to the managers and coaches and get a few useful thoughts about these players, I couldn't sit there with you, and I appreciate that, because that was one of my favorite occupations, if you even want to call it that. I love doing that. I hate it when the baby cakes left town for Wichita, and of course they're sitting up there now with a brand new stadium in Wichita and no baseball in the minor leagues. And you and I talked about this, Kenny. Those minor league owners and guys that would be playing in the minor leagues and the people that would be working in those minor league ballparks, they're paying the price for this COVID interruption. And I really hope we can get to a point in time where we can collect again safely and have baseball. And I hope they don't eviscerate minor league baseball. I just think those folks down in low A, high A, that where you're working your way, these guys are working their way up to the big leagues. And those people that run those teams don't make a ton of money. They're not ripping off the community. Those little teams are an important part of where a community gathers and whatnot in those little towns that don't have anything else. And
it's the most affordable entertainment for people.
Well, it's affordable. That's what they said. Affordable family fun.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing they always say. Well, it's the truth, and
Sure.
and that's where people, I think, latch on to players in those low minor leagues, and they see a guy that catches their eye and they go, I think this guy's got something, and if it comes to pass, and it's rare, the prospects in low A and high A of minor league baseball are few and far between. The guys that are going to go to the big leagues are few and far between. But when you see them and you follow them, year after year after year, it's how people begin to connect with Major League Baseball. And I'm not a huge fan of Rob Manfred as commissioner of baseball. I'm trying to figure out if he actually likes baseball, but he likes being commissioner. I know that, but I'm not so sure. I mean, with them, with the changes they're playing around with now, in this short season, they're just trying to get 16 teams and head for the playoffs. Which will supposedly make them a few bucks on television, but I don't know. I have a few doubts in my mind, but
me too.
I'm with you, Kenny. I hope we can put together something attractive to a Double-A team, and maybe draw them to the Shrine on Airline and have professional baseball, because Double-A is a really interesting level of baseball if we can lure someone here.
Right. No doubt. Well, I hope we do it. I hope I get a chance to do game with you again, because that'd be the joy of my life, my friend. Listen, thank you for spending time with us tonight. Sorry for the loss of your teammate and friend, and nothing but blessings to you and yours. You hear?
Well, thank you so much. And I'm sorry about the circumstances, but you guys take care, and thank you for having me.
Hey, man, Rod, love you, man.
Swoboda. All right.
Yeah, you guys be well, and you guys be well and do good stuff, and we'll catch up with you.
You got it. Ron Swoboda.